going to start by giving a few thanks, of course, but my presentation, let me just say that I'm honored to be in your presence. I have the opportunity to work with teaching artists, really for the last couple of years, and then be invited by Gary at the Philharmonic, and it is always a blessing for me because I end up learning more about myself by the time I leave your presence. So I'm here to share the art of culturally responsive education. I first want to say it's a 52-year field of research, so in no way can I really do justice to it in 45 minutes, but I will do my best, right, to share what I would say the basics or the 101 of it, and then give some comments in between. So I want to bring my student into the room with me, and she said that part of doing the work is getting others to do the work as well. And I want to first thank Piper Anderson for being such an incredible support of me and my work. Sister, you supported me, thank you, I'm losing my earrings too. You supported me, sister, before I really had a chance to know you, and I knew you from afar with the work that you did with young people who were incarcerated and supporting them and their families. So I want to say publicly that I love you and I respect you and I thank you so much. Thank you. I want to thank, of course, Gary Padmore. That is my brother. I'm just grateful for your invitation to the Philharmonic, for the support and the mentoring that you have been giving to me since we met. And I wouldn't know Gary if it wasn't for Paul Murphy. Paul, where are you? My brother, Paul Murphy, thank you for introducing me to Gary, because this is like changing my life, obviously, right? And I want to thank Tracy for hosting this today and for welcoming me into your home, and thank the dancers that got us started. Did I leave anyone out? I'd like to thank my mom. All right. Y'all get me, this is good. I want to bring who I call affectionately Uncle Jimmy. If you've had any PD with me before, you know that I bring Uncle Jimmy, James Baldwin, into the room. I often bring Queen Toni Morrison, who's now an ancestor as well. And I want to encourage you with this quote where James Baldwin said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed unless it is faced." And let that be the spirit when we begin to talk about issues of what is culturally responsive education, what does it mean to talk about race, racism, white supremacy, hegemony, all of these terms, right, that we know are at the schools when we get there because they're in society. And so I ask that you submit to his wisdom this morning and throughout your day. A very quick definition for culture. There are multiple definitions for culture. This is one that I offer to you. Shared perceptions of a group's value, expectations, and norms, right? It reflects the way we give priorities to our goals. It reflects the way that we see the world. I'm going a little bit off script. Our ways of knowing, our ways of being. It's often how we cope with the world. And we also know that culture is shifting, right? So if you think about the young people that we work with, that we serve, we have the honor of serving, they are negotiating multiple cultures at the same time. So it's often what we may say popular culture, or culture that excites them through music, through dance, through affiliations, goth culture, skateboarding culture, hip hop culture. And then there's also the culture of the home. And that could be very varied. It could be multicultural within the home, where they are negotiating languages and ways of knowing and different types of foods, right? And then it's also the culture of the school. And the culture of the school is often at odds with the culture of the home and the popular culture that they embody. We often tell them that when you come into this space, this is the culture here. Take off your hat, do this, do that. And I'm not saying that we need structure, right? We all need structure, and young people need structure as well. But when it becomes more about controlling their bodies and not allowing them to bring themselves into the space, we have to begin to question, what are we really doing, right? What are we really teaching, and who are we really serving? Good morning, Nina. Good morning. So I'm going to give you 52-year history in about 5 seconds, okay? Y'all with me? Okay, so culturally relevant. 1983, Gloria Ladson Billings, her dissertation became a book called The Dream Keepers. In that beautiful piece of work, she followed 8 teachers I believe 5 were African American and 3 were white, and they were considered by their communities as exemplar teachers, specifically of African American boys. And so in that book, you are able to see what they do in their classroom, their philosophy, their beliefs about teaching, and the love that they have for the communities that they serve. And I want to give you really the short of my presentation. I'm pretty much a one-trick pony, if you will. Love is the answer for me. And that if we are not loving, if we do not love the children that we serve, even if we're only with them for a short period of time as teaching artists, then I want to submit that we're not fully serving them. Culturally responsive, Geneva Gay, around the same time, 85 or so, her work, and specifically her book, Culturally Responsive Theory and Practice, she expands it a bit much from Gloria Ladson-Billings, and she adds in language varieties. She also adds in children beyond the African American cultural milieu, right? So she adds in Hmong students and Latino students, and really takes a look at their culture and the languages that they speak and how that impacts the way that they interact with school. Right around 2011, Gloria Ladson, and often these are interchangeable, I should tell you. People often use culturally relevant, culturally responsive. I actually use culturally responsive after I saw a video with Geneva Gay, and she said, when you go to the doctor and there's something wrong with you, do you want the doctor to give you something that's relevant to your problem or responsive to your problem? So that kind of hit me, and I'm thinking, yes, and responsive is also a verb that keeps on going, because when things change, if we have a mindset of, and a heart, and a mind of being responsive, we're ready to change what needs to happen. So right around 2011 in Harvard Ed Review, Gloria Ladson-Billings passed the proverbial baton to Django Paris and Sammy Alim. And they have now broadened the field, and we talk more about culturally sustaining education. And in fact, New York City Department of Education, when it adopted its definition for CRE, it's CRSE. So it's culturally responsive, sustaining education. And that definition will actually shape the professional development that they will seek from vendors from now until hopefully beyond Carranza. And so some of the major players, James Banks and his wife, Cherry McGee Banks, were really the mother and father of the multicultural movement. That's the precursor to culturally responsive, relevant, sustaining education. And that was right around the 1970s. In the 60s, a lot of campuses were on fire. Black and Latino students said they want to see themselves in the curriculum. They were tired of reading just white authors and hearing history from just white perspectives. And so literally some of these campuses were on fire. Right here at CUNY, not far from here, students locked themselves right inside of the campus because they demanded a different type of curriculum. I don't have Sonia Nieto up here. I should. She is also a mother of multicultural education, focusing a lot on Latino students. Ladson-Billings, Christine Sleeter, Rich Milner, and Django Paris. So these are some of the leaders. So if you're interested in reading more about this, when you start investigating the field, you'll come across these names. So what is it? What is culturally responsive education? Geneva Gay offers this definition. She says it's an approach that empowers students intellectually, socially, emotionally, politically, by using cultural reference. We often don't think of children as being political in any way, right? But they are, even if it's not, thank goodness, Republican, Independent, Democratic at this point. They don't have that mindset, but they know when something is fair and when it's not fair. They know that when AP courses look predominantly white, even in a school that is predominantly students of color, and all of the white kids are in the AP courses, they know something's not right. They know if they've been funneled into special education and all of their courses are in the basement, and other students are having courses on the higher levels, politically they know that something is not right. So they have a sense of politics, and we often don't think that they do. But what culturally responsive education says, it recognizes that students have a political mindset, that they're aware of their social environment, right? That they are intellectually capable of having conversations about inequality and equity in ways that we do. We often don't want to venture there, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. So I want to offer, I'm conflating this now, right? You see how I'm going back and forth. So even though I use the language culturally responsive from Geneva Gay, I pull from the tenets of Gloria Ladson-Billings. Her major 3 tenets is to always have high expectations, academic expectations. This is not a kumbaya, oh, let me learn about your culture, oh, that's so cute, I love you. Yes, love is important, but there's always high academic expectations that accompany that love. Cultural competency, the development of our own as teachers, cultural competency. I'm still learning. This is my 29th year of teaching. Yes, I know I look 29, thank you. And I move like I'm 17. Thank you, NDI dancers. I had a chance to show my thing this morning, right? But the cultural competency that is developed not just in the students, but in ourselves. Because what culturally responsive education does, it automatically opens our heart and our mind to the children who are in front of us. And so if you're teaching Latino, if you're teaching Vietnamese and Japanese students, you cannot just have one perspective. You have to be able to bring in different musics, different poems, different ways of knowing that reflect the cultures that are in front of you. And you have to invite them to bring it into the classroom. And believe me, they can do this at a very, very, very young age. And the hardest part, for teachers in particular, is bullet number 3. Because to develop the socio-political consciousness of students means that you are inviting them to critically analyze everything, including your own teaching. Can I get an amen? Amen? Right. And so we are often not comfortable with that because we really don't like critique. We are of a society that everybody gets an A, everybody's wonderful, everybody's beautiful, and what's that land in Lord of the Flies? What's this? Lake, you know, I'm an English teacher, this is quite embarrassing. So there's that land in the Lord of the Flies, right, that everything is wonderful, the men are strong, everybody's perfect. And because we have spent so much money on our degrees, and we're still paying for them, we feel like we should have that authority, and what we say goes. We don't always consciously do it, but subconsciously we understand the role of authority in the classroom, and sometimes that blocks us from being open to critique from our own students. But when we raise their socio-political consciousness, that's what we're inviting. So it requires vulnerability on our part, right, and humility to realize, as Maxine Green said, at the age of 96, I am what I'm not yet. That I'm still becoming, and my students can help me get to where I need to go. So why should we even bother teaching this way? First of all, it's beautiful, it's alive, it's challenging, it makes, I don't know, I'm set on fire. I didn't realize that I was teaching this. I was teaching this way, I think, for 10 years, and then I came across Geneva Gay's book. I'm like, oh, that's what I'm doing, right? So it makes my teaching more exciting. I think the reality is the children that we are serving are different. And not to draw back on nostalgia that our time was so wonderful and great, it's just a different time. It's just a different generation, and yes, social media and podcasts and video games do impact learning. They engage. I think about my own daughter, where she's talking to me, she's on the phone, she's doing her homework on the computer, and the music is playing. I said, Olivia, did you hear me? And she tells me exactly everything that I said. So, also populations in schools. There used to be districts that would be all white. That's hard to find, you know, and it's still white flight. You know, when people of color show up, people are still kind of getting closer. I'm telling you, people are going to start living in the jungle at this point. Because, I mean, where can you go? So populations of communities are beginning to be more and more integrated in terms of multicultural, multilingual ways of knowing and being. And so schools have to shift. The way we do things, the way we think, has to shift so that we can be open and not accommodating, respectful of our students' backgrounds. And remember NCLB, every child left behind? No, like when you were, right? Remember that. But the one thing that policy did for teachers or for schools, it did kind of bring out of the shadows those students who were marginalized and sort of forgotten. Our students who have varying abilities, or some may call disabilities. Suddenly they had to be counted. That even though the measurements were faulty in terms of these standardized tests, but they still had to be counted to say that they are learning something through some of these measurements. So NCLB did allow us to say all children have to be counted in a way that they were not before. And culturally responsive education does just that. You count, you matter, I see you. It's a humanizing pedagogy that allows us to be in community with the humans in front of us. So what keeps us from teaching this way? This was going to be interactive. I have to be mindful of my time, but over the years I've learned through my students and through teachers that I've worked with that these are the overriding themes. That many folks, those who in particular who identify as white, were really told, don't say black. No, don't say that. This colorblind, and Mika Pollack talks about that, her very, very important work where she looked at a high school where they had this sort of colorblind ideology. And really, as Christine Sleater offers us, when you have that ideology, you're saying that you don't see the child. So you've been taught, though, colorblind, just, I don't care what color you are. I just want you to read. I want you to dance. I want you to play that instrument. But no, what we're doing in saying that is negating all of the cultural beauty that that student brings to the dance, to the music, to the ways of knowing. And so the colorblind perspective often is in the way. And when people are raised this way, it's very difficult to disentangle, right? It's very difficult to talk about things when you were nurtured by your mom, your dad, your aunties that you love very much, but then you realize, wow, that was some racist, homophobic stuff that was said around the table, at Thanksgiving. So it is constantly for us as teachers, and I think we're capable more than anyone else of doing that unpacking and that interrupting of those scripts that were given to us. And I want to say that we have to do it if we're going to serve and love children. Lack of knowledge. If you are from a monocultural background, monolingual, and you have 15 different languages and cultures represented in your classroom, you feel that you don't know enough. And the beauty of culturally responsive education, because it's centered on humility and vulnerability, you don't have to know everything. But what you do know how to do is to be able to relate to the children in front of you, to open up that space where they can bring in their knowledge, and that knowledge then becomes shared knowledge. So the lack of knowledge often scares people away, just feeling overwhelmed. Teachers are experiencing burnout like never before. I think most professions are. And there's this company called Medscape. In 2017, they came out with a study looking at the United States, all across the United States. From 42 to 53%, all across the nation, people are experiencing burnout. And when you experience burnout, you feel disaffected, you feel disconnected from your job, you feel disconnected from the people in your life. And teachers, which is why I respect and love them so much, we are really in the thick of it, because as we're experiencing our own burnout, we are also holding space for children whose parents are experiencing burnout, and they bring all that energy to the classroom. And oftentimes, if they're the young babies, they may not know how to express it, so it might come out in crying, it may come out in fits, it may come out in disconnecting, right? And so we're the repository in some ways, which is why we must practice empathy, humility. Piper, thank you for saying empathy. And this is why I respect teachers, because our profession, an artist, James Baldwin and Maya Angelou said that artists will save the world. And it's true. So we do have this special superpower. I'm calling myself an artist because I'm going to tell you all about my book of poetry at the end. And I have a QR code so you can order it because I'm a professional. Right? But I've been writing poetry for 30 years, but only with this book, which is a project of liberation, I took on the title of poet. But when you have a special gift that you can engage people in the movement of their bodies or playing an instrument or challenging their mind, a lot of responsibility comes with that. And we need to have a network outside so that as we serve, we have people who can hold us, because it will require more of us. And culturally responsive education asks you to do that. And then of course there's guilt. And this goes both ways. I want to speak a moment to the people of color in the room who are teaching children of color. And those of us who've kind of, let's say, made it up the salary scale, although we know that we never get paid enough. But when our children are in the struggle, and the thing about culturally responsive education, you're opening up space for social emotional windows. So when they trust you, they will tell you things. So teachers are often very overwhelmed with feeling like they have things that their students do not. And that's where you need, again, not just humility, but memory. So for those folks, white folks who grew up poor, people of color who grew up poor, remember what it was like for you. Remember the importance of education for you. Remember what that art did for you. And if it was good enough for you to help you to where you are, then it's good enough for the children that you serve. And to really think not about a saving mentality, but about you're teaching them something that can help open up something for themselves, even in the moment that they don't realize it. But that's our job. That's our work, right? And so oftentimes teachers get overwhelmed with guilt, because outside of writing a check every week for the kid, what are you going to do? And remember this, all things are impermanent and temporary. But I say that at the same time, recognizing that last year was the commemoration of 400 years of inequality in this country, which was 4 centuries of the dehumanization project. So that seems to be constant, but people have still risen in so many ways. We're still here. I'm going to quickly share this with you. I'm going to point to the bottom. This is a framework that I'm working on. So what I discovered about 4 years ago, maybe 5, that before people can really take up culturally responsive education, they have to do the self-work. Because then it just becomes a PD session, right? It just becomes a series of professional development. If the heart and the head are not aligned, if you've not done the work to where issues of racism and prejudice and classism and homophobia and Islamophobia and other phobias and isms live within you, and you don't excavate that, it will constantly show up. It will constantly show up, because why? It's already in the air. We're breathing it. So what I've been teaching myself and others is trying to operationalize this framework. And I'm only going to focus on this because in no way is this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? That it has to go up this way, which, by the way, Maslow created that model from indigenous folks. And actually the model from the indigenous folks is inverted, right? Where spirit and well-being is at the top. In any case, we have to have a profound ethical commitment to caring for the communities we work in. And even if we're just there for 6 months or 3 months or 2 weeks, we're just dropping in and dropping out as teaching artists, there still must be a profound ethical commitment to loving the children that you're with during that time. And love looks like openness, it looks like respect, it looks like, we know what love looks like. We know when it's tainted, which is what my book is all about. Love from the Vortex. Okay, y'all. And we know also when it serves people well. But there must be a love, not just for our profession and what we teach, but for the children that we're serving. And at another time, I can talk about other things: critical humility, critical reflection, historical literacy. How much do you know about the communities that you're serving in? Not just, first of all, you have to have an understanding of the history of this country, right? Because oftentimes we forget that. You know, we took sociology in college and we forget that this country, this world has been purposely structured so that communities are exactly as they are. But what we do is we have historical amnesia, and we always blame the families, the communities, right? But with the historical literacy, you're always remembering the structures that we're living within, and you're also learning and respecting the deep and rich contextual historical forces that shape that particular community. The community of the world, the community of the US, the community of that neighborhood, the community of the school. And then the last two things I'll say is this archaeology of the self. This is what I think it takes to move our practice. It has to be that deep work, and that's ongoing. It's not 1 or 2 or even 10 sessions. And my hope is that when people engage in the archaeology of the self, that they will interrupt their racist, homophobic, all of those poisonous practices that get in between looking at our students and other people as humans. You know what? I have a portable speaker, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to play it. Oh, it's coming. Well, as it's coming, let me ask, because I've been doing a lot of talking. How are we feeling? How is this landing with us? Any comments, feelings? Let's hear you. I want to hear your voices. Somebody.
Affirming.
Affirming. Who said that? Affirming. What's your name?
Krista.
Hi, Krista.
Hi. I'm a parent of 3 kids, and I'm hearing this a lot as a parent and an educator. So it's landing in both places.
Okay, what's your name?
Alexandra.
Thank you, Alexandra. Other thoughts? You know I'm looking at you because that hat is so fly. That hat, let me do a 2-step. Wow. Anything you want to share?
You know, you speak in such a joyful way that I feel like I'm talking to someone that's in my family. And it's just easy to listen to what you're saying. And I mean, outside of being affirming, I think it's so colorful how you're bringing this to us and how you're breaking it down. I love it. I love what you're saying. All of it.
Thank you, may it hit your heart, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And tell me your name. Yes. Oh, for sure. We're going to hear it because I don't want you to be interrupted. Oh, yeah, please. We got music, y'all. Tell me your name.
Cesare.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Cesare.
Cesare.
Yeah.
I'll work on it. I'll get it right.
Yeah, you got it. You're good.
And in the back, yes.
You are a reflection of what you are teaching. The way that you are speaking to us, you are reflecting what you are talking about. And so it makes it palatable, it makes it believable, and I just want to say, about time. Thank you.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate y'all, and I hope you appreciate this video, because artists are dope, y'all. For real. To kind of clap from that, right? But at the same time, it deserves the respect for the beauty. If we had time, I would be asking you to turn and talk, but I want you to carry that piece of art with you throughout the day, and I show it for this reason, that our former New York City chancellor, and this is what culturally responsive education opens up for, to have these kinds of conversations that are happening in reality, that are affecting students. She said, as painful as these events are, I strongly believe that as New York City educators and parents, we have the moral obligation to address the difficult questions about race, violence, and guns, and to engage students in the critical work of healing our country. We must not avoid these tough conversations. They are necessary if we hope to build a just society for all. And so, in using art with a culturally responsive lens, it opens up the opportunity to talk about issues in society, to talk about ourselves, family, about joy and pain, about trauma and recovery, and also academics. So history, historical literacy, which is part of my paradigm, can be taught through art and open up conversations about the history of the country and the connections to present day, right? Historical literacy through media, right? Through documentaries, powerful documentaries. I'm Not Your Negro and Ava DuVernay's When They See Us about the Central Park Five. Visual literacy. These are exercises I do with my students. Take a minute to free write. What do you see? That opens up conversations, right, about where students are in terms of their identity and their experiences. Just really using art or music or dance in this very powerful way. And using arts through a culturally responsive lens, for those of you who've not yet listened to Chimamanda Adichie's Danger of a Single Story, please put it on like your Friday night watch list. It is powerful. And what I'm saying is culturally responsive education opens up a lens to eradicate the single stories that we write about children and their communities, that we have been writing, in the case of, I would say, Black folks, for 4 centuries in this country, and for Latinos going all the way back, and our indigenous brothers and sisters, who we tend to erase altogether. It allows us to tell our stories. I use the Where I'm From poem, and for those of you who might be interested in doing this in your classroom, I use Willie Perdomo's Where I'm From. I use George Ella Lyons' Where I'm From. I'm a woman of the hip hop movement, so I use Diggable Planets, Where I'm From. And multimedia, in a multimedia way, I put all of those pieces together, and then my students, of course, write their Where I'm From poems, and we open up space to talk about where we're from, but also where we are going. And so this is the plug for the book. And part of my, my pyramid, the archaeology of the self, what I want to say is that the archaeology of the self is not just done in our work. It's also done in our personal lives. And so for me, the last 4 years of my life, around this idea of pursuing love, I've been divorced 10 years, and it's a trip out there, y'all, for those of you on the dating scene. So I learned a couple of things over the 4 years, and I've been writing poetry again for 30 years. Some of these poems are about 15 years old, but the last batch of 40 of them were written in the last 2 years. And so I share this. It's very raw, it's very vulnerable. It's my archaeological dig around love and intimacy. And so I'll just have it up there. Definitely you don't have to. And usually I would bring postcards, because I have a postcard where I have put a stamp on it, a love stamp, of course, and asking you to send a love note to someone you care about. But there's also the QR code to learn more about the book. And also, I'm going to do readings. I'm going to go on a 12-city tour, and I will be reading at a Black or Brown-owned cafe, a local library, or an academic institution. My goal is to bring the conversation of love into the academy. It is such a cold place sometimes, and our students and some of our colleagues need love. Amen to that. And so that's the end. What I want to say is that responsiveness in schools, we use strategies that help students to plan and think concretely about their future. They're examining the present, they're projecting to the future, they're relying on their lives and their experiences to get there. Providing culturally responsive professional development for teachers and staff is important, so I'm hoping that you're in schools where you will hear more of this because of Karanta and the way things are going, and Nina's gonna talk a whole lot more about that later. Absolutely, beautiful stuff that she's bringing. And I also wanna say that it shows students how academic knowledge can be applied to real world issues and things that they care about. And that is it. I wanna bring my friend Edwin Mayorga into this. And Edwin said that I fight for the creation of a more just world. When you come across my photo, remember that while the world is often an ugly place as it is, remain hopeful in the radical possibilities that come from working together in the beautiful struggle. We are indeed in a struggle. We have always been in a struggle. Teachers understand that. Sometimes we're in our own struggle. And so I hope that today you are willing to do that work, to take the deep dive, to struggle with where your phobias and your isms are, and eradicate them so that you can serve the children in the way they deserve to be served. And with that, that's it. We don't have time to, I just wanted to get a picture of dance up there. If we have more time, we would be doing popcorn style, what struck you, carry it with you for the day. And I thank you so much for your time. What a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.